It's the Franklin Show from Franklin with America's favorite adopted pup, Franklin Delano Roosevelt Lloyd Wright Sinatra Seltzer, and his friend and favorite Franklin dog adopter, Michael Seltzer. I'm your announcer, Greg St. James from WABX. And now, here's Franklin.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Franklin Show, another fabulous edition. And this one is a little special because we're going back nostalgically to the late 1960s to visit with some of the original Detroit Air Aces from the great WABX, a freeform progressive rock and roll station that really set trends all over the country. ABX is legendary, so were the many talents that were part of that radio station, and we've got three of them, three on-air Air Aces, and their news director. So this will be a very special edition, very nostalgic, looking back to the 1960s and slightly beyond with some of the legendary Detroit radio disc jockeys from WABX Detroit. We'll be right back with our guests. Stand by.
I don't remember how it started.
Go to that.
Oh boy.
Our back and forth. It always came back.
Dad!
You probably don't remember what you told me,
That was perfect.
but I heard every word.
Okay, hey everybody, welcome to the Franklin Show. This is a very special show. I am really excited because we're going way back to a time when radio was fun, when radio was experimental, and there was something called freeform progressive radio. And the origin of that and the legendary radio station all over the world, I mean, everybody knows this radio station, was WABX in Detroit. And I have gathered together with a group of some of the original Air Aces, and I couldn't be happier to have them all here. I've got Dan Carlisle, I've got Dennis Frawley, I've got Harvey Ovshinsky, and I've got Jerry Goodwin, who's on the phone. And I'm going to start with you, Danny, because you and I have developed a great relationship over the years. You come back to Detroit once a year, and every time you do, we go back to your haunting grounds of Clawson, Michigan. I see the home you grew up in. We go to your favorite diner and have meatloaf. Whenever I'm in San Francisco, you take me around your neighborhood. We go have ice cream. And Danny is doing something now. If you go to your phone machine and you click on this little podcast thing and podcasts come up and you type in the Everything Show, you'll find that Danny has a radio program called the Everything Show, and it's on every week. And here it is, boom, the Everything Show with Dan Carlisle. And he is doing the same magical ABX progressive freeform crazy rock and roll today, and I just couldn't be happier. So, Danny, where did it all begin, man?
At Michigan State University. It's one of the first. That was the first radio gig I had.
And what kind of music were you playing back then?
Oh, then top 40. We were top 40 was king, so we thought we had to learn how to do that. Before that, of course, I was the wire boy at WXYZ for the newsroom.
Yeah.
They take care of the wire services and help give it to Bill Bonds and Lee Allen, give him the weather. So.
And then you ended up at ABX. And I mean, that was the most exciting radio station because you guys were just crazy. You could do anything you wanted to do, play anything you wanted to play. And what I really loved about it was, well, not only introducing all kinds of music that you would never be introduced to. But the rap in between your shifts, I mean, you guys would go on sometimes for 20 minutes, half hour, just rapping. And I love those. They were just spontaneous. And talk about that. I mean, that was
Well, I don't know if we really understood what we were getting into when we first went to ABX. I think for most of us, it was a gig in the Fifth Market. So, but because nobody gave us any direction, we just gave ourselves direction. And with the 11 o'clock rap, I think, was where the interchange stuff started. Dixon was coming in to do the Night Tripper, and I was leaving for the evening. And we would just talk about our day or make things up, have fun with it.
Well, Dave is one of my heroes, and I mean, we lost him years ago, unfortunately. He ended up down in Florida for a while, hosting an all-night movie show, the Dave Dixon Show. I can't remember what the heck the name was, but he was on WKID Channel 51 in Miami, and my mother-in-law lived in Boca. And so that was a great excuse for me to go visit every couple of months, because I would stay up all night long and watch Dave Dixon doing TV. He was like the Bill Kennedy of Southern Florida, and he would play the most outrageous old black and white TV shows and movies, and chat in between them. But his musical knowledge, he was an encyclopedia. And I loved listening to Dixon. He was a tough dude. I mean, I know he ended up on WDET for a while, and that was a great gig for him. But and you were a great supporter of his. We all were. Dave was just amazing. We're going to show a clip of Dave interviewing Frank Zappa, Ted Nugent later in the show on what was called the Detroit Tube Works. Do you remember that? The Detroit Tube Works?
I do. I was on the air in Miami when Dave was doing his his television show.
Yeah.
And he showed me one day that he had shirts made. He was a large man, so you didn't just go to Sears and get a shirt. And he had them made in bright colors and designs. He said that worked best on television. That he would, instead of hiding his girth, he would accent it. But yeah, he was an interesting guy. I think the one thing that we did was one weekend, and I know there's adults watching this, okay? One weekend, if we had time to hang out, we would go. He would like to go to the strip club, and then the next time he would go to the gay bar with me. So
he was an equal opportunity offender, is what he was, right?
Yeah, he was a difficult guy.
Yeah,
but somehow we worked it out.
And he was one of the writers of I Dig Rock and Roll Music, Peter, Paul, and Mary, right?
Right, and the song "The Word Is Love." He was their creative director.
So Dan, I'm so privileged to have known you all these years, and I'm so grateful. And I love the show that you're doing now. For those of you who haven't listened, check out the Everything show with Dan Carlisle, live from San Francisco. It's eclectic. It's ABX today. So I mean, I'm glad that you're still broadcasting and using that gift that you have. And I know you do an awful lot of research, because you don't have a music library there at that radio station. You bring in your own stuff.
Yeah, you have to buy your own music every week.
Yeah. Well, that's why you get paid the big bucks, right?
Yeah, right. But it's an interesting station. It's just a collection of people who do what they want to do. It's a LP station, a low power in San Francisco, public station.
Yeah. Well, great. All right. So now I want to move on to the great Dennis Frawley. And Dennis, you had a long career at ABX, probably the longest of anybody, right? Where's Dennis Frawley? Oh, we lost. Okay, well, I'll tell people that Dennis Frawley should be back soon. And in the interim, I'm going to move along to Harvey Ovshinsky, who is the news director at ABX. Harvey, how are you?
I'm fine, Michael. How are you? And thank you for doing this. We have not seen each other for years, literally.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to have you. You were the news director, and obviously that was a unique opportunity. And I know from there you developed the Fifth Estate with Peter Werby. But talk about those early days on ABX doing the news.
Well, it was a delight because in those days, people our age didn't want to listen to the news on Top 40 radio and elsewhere. The news just didn't interest them. So we knew what was going on in our universe, our constellation of the early 70s and late 60s. So I reported news that spoke to the needs and passions and feelings of our audience. And I played music often with the help of the jocks. If there was an anti-war march on Kennedy Square, I'd play Phil Oakes' I Ain't Marching Anymore, or the Beatles for an abortion demonstration, Your Mother Should Know. So we gave a little sugar for the medicine to go down, and that worked. And so in terms of content and delivery, it was quite exciting. Because I want to just correct you on one level. In your intro, you suggested how crazy ABX was.
Yeah.
Its success was not because it was crazy. Its success was because it was smart. The jocks were smart. The news was smart. We did not insult anybody's intelligence. We spoke to where our audience was at and where we wanted them to go. It was fun and it was wild.
Yeah.
But it was also educational in a delightful way.
I would agree. Yeah, no, I would agree. When I say crazy, it was because it was such a unique and completely free kind of music and format. There were no jingles. Nobody was telling you what you had to play. You could play the entire In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida without interruption. You didn't have to.
I remember I threatened to quit. Detz was just this close to putting on ads for the Defense Department. I said, no, no. Me or them. No, it was seriously entertaining, educational, and transformative. I think the experience of listening to ABX. Everyone else used that word, whether it was the news or the music or the concerts or the kite-in or the conference on youth and community, because I was also a public affairs director, and we had voter registration drives and really hands-on engagement with the community that we served. Very much like I did when I was with the Fifth Estate. Another correction, I started the Fifth Estate and then became news director at ABX, not the other way around. But I tried to do with the news what I did with the Fifth Estate, what Peter and I were doing.
Well, I used to walk up to, I grew up in the 7 Mile and Evergreen area, and I used to walk up to a head shop called the Silver Hammer to pick up my copy of the Fifth Estate. And so I'm well, I know well about that publication.
And you weren't arrested? How old were you? You weren't expelled from high school?
I was in my, mid-teens, 15, 16, Obviously, those were very, very challenging times for us all. Look, the 60s was the craziest decade. Think about that. Yeah, I mean, the Beatles landed in 1963 with this little mop top haircut that everybody was freaking out about. And just a few years later, by 1967, 68, their hair was down to the middle of their back and they were doing LSD. And, it was a whole different transformation in a very short period of time. And all of the racial unrest and political unrest and, assassinations in that decade, 3 assassinations, that was an absolutely amazing 10-year period that I grew up in.
I rarely have regrets about leaving the station. I went on to do television work and filmmaking and teaching. But with these days, I wish I was back on the radio. Have I got news for you? In the era of Trump, there's no shortage of rock and roll tunes or Dylan songs or others about kings and minions and tyranny. And, I remember Tom Petty had a song called It's Good to Be King. I wish I was doing the news.
Yeah.
So that I could, although I'm not sure Century Broadcasting would be able to tolerate the pressure that Trump is putting on and the FCC is about to put on radio stations and television.
Well, we're into turbulent times. I mean, there always are turbulent times, but I just think the '60s was the most turbulent. But anyway, that's just my own opinion.
I think the 2000, what year are we in?
2025.
This will make the '60s look like kindergarten in terms of wildness and upsetness and anger and rage and chaos. I mean, I wish we had a station to speak to these times and musicians who would speak to these times.
So, Harvey, you've got a new book out, and you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, it's now 3 years old, although it keeps selling out on Amazon and at independent bookstores. So I'm delighted. It's called Scratching the Surface: Adventures in Storytelling. The surface. Adventures in Story, which documents my work at ABX, before that, Fifth Estate, after that, television in terms of documentaries, screenplays, filmmaking, and then teaching. And then, of course, my relationship, professional, personal, with my father, Stanford Ovshinsky. Google him.
Right.
The mad scientist.
Yes, he was.
So they were adventures, as ABX was.
Yeah.
So was the other work that I did in multimedia since then, and continue to do on the level that I can. Right now, I still teach in terms of consulting with young and up-and-coming visual storytellers. I love that.
That's fantastic.
Sharing with them what I've know and learned from my days telling the kind of stories that were important to me.
It's great to have you here, and I appreciate your taking the time.
All right.
Now, Dennis Frawley, I think you were the longest continuous member of the ABX staff. Am I right?
Think so. I think probably. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. You sound great, man. You sound like Dennis Frawley.
Yes. I think I was probably 3 times longer than anyone else. I was there for 11 and a half years straight, except for when we were fired. Rudnick and I were fired.
That's a whole nother topic. You and Bob Rudnick, cocaine karma. But the start of your career at ABX was what, 1969?
Right. Yeah. I don't know when we came in, March or April. We were still writing for the East Village Other, the Cocaine Karma show, music editors of Cavalier magazine, which was number 2 to Playboy at the time. Also, we had the Electric Cocaine Karma in East Orange, New Jersey, WFMU. The station continues on now. It's one of the major freeform stations in the country. It's now in Jersey City, and it's still there. We used to bring in people, from that we knew, because I had been bartender at the Steve Paul's The Scene after graduating college and getting from University of Miami and getting a 4F for marijuana and LSD. I told the psychiatrist he should take LSD, which I thought maybe that would work. And I thought I'd never get away with it. So I was going to join the reserves real fast. I was told you had a college degree, you could join the reserves and you didn't have to die immediately. Speaking of Vietnam, we did another thing. We had Crosby and Nash did a benefit for the Winter Soldier investigation.
Yes.
Which was held in Detroit, which I went to because I'm a masochist. I went and saw that. I could only take about an hour of it, but it was really sad to hear all of it. You can see it on YouTube, some of it. On there, you'll see John Kerry is there, and where they really talk about some of the terrible things that went on, Anyway.
But you went on through.
We did the Electric Cocaine Karma out there. Rudnick had a column in the Miami Hurricane called Beyond the Syringe. So he was ahead of our time. As we used to say, we don't do any cocaine. Don't do cocaine. It's overpriced and overrated, because actually amphetamines were so cheap in those days. Nobody could afford cocaine. When I was bartending, the bands that were on the Ed Sullivan Show and everything say, "Come on over, we got cocaine." I could care less. The hookers had it.
All right, but you transformed in a number of ways over the years on ABX, because you had how many different program directors and different management people?
Well, the big thing was we had no program director. I loved that.
Well, originally.
No, we had no program director until really 1975. That was the good thing about it. I played black records.
Was it that long? It was till 75?
Yeah, until we got Bob Birch.
Who was the program director in 75?
There was Bob Birch came in, and they came in from Casey in St. Louis.
Yeah.
They wanted us to sound like Casey. We were playing things like Pavlov's Dog with David Surkamp, who of course had a voice like a dog whistle. And we're playing in the San Francisco bands. I mean, the St. Louis bands. And a lot of country. They're much more country there, you know. And they took away all the oldies. Everything started with the Beatles then. Right. And they also they took away all the black music, except for maybe Hendrix, you know. Hendrix was okay.
And then in what, 1981?
And then we were getting, what's that?
You got fired in 81? Is that about right?
No, September of 80. I made it for that time. Al Wilson wanted to fire me for 5 years.
Oh, God bless him.
Yeah. I mean, everybody told me, all the program directors, watch out for Al, look out for Al. All the promo men, everybody knew he was out to fire me. I guess he was not saying nice things.
Were you working? Was Richard Golden the sales guy at that point?
Well, Richard Golden and I were probably the longest people on the station, because he was there when I got there. He was the one that probably kept the ABX making money. I mean, nobody got paid by Century. It was really cheapskates.
Yeah.
I was seeing that. Who's the guy that had those? I did a thing with him, and everybody. I think Carlisle did too. What was he does? Anyway, I heard what's the name from DRQ, who was our
China Jones.
Ted Ferguson.
He's gone on and had an illustrious.
He was talking about when he was program director at K West in L.A. that they were paying him $29,000 a year.
He's done very well for himself in later years.
He said then he got a job in Shreveport as station manager. He was making $90,000 in Shreveport.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine that?
All right, now I want to bring in our friend Jerry Goodwin, who's on the phone. We could not get connected. Jerry, I have such great recollections of you. First of all, I grew up listening to Keener 13. Keener was the hottest radio station. Top 40 music went from 0 to 100 in a minute, and you were one of the architects of Keener 13. And then as I transformed from my Keener Top 40 love to ABX, suddenly you're Jerry Goodwin with long hair, and you're saying things like man, and playing freeform rock and roll. What a transformation that was.
Yeah, actually, the transformation went from Keener AM to Keener FM, KNR FM, when I was working with Russ Gibb, and we were playing, all the wonderful psychedelic music. But we were not in stereo. ABX was a stereo. We were not stereo, and I think that's one of the attractions that ABX had, of course, was it was a stereo radio station. While I was at KNR FM, Danny came over and joined us with John Small, as I recall, and then I went over to ABX. It was very strange. Dan was at KNR FM during the Paul McCartney hoax.
Oh, right. Paul is dead.
Which I thought was absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Well, that was Russ Gibb was the one who started that, wasn't he?
Well, yes, Russ and Dan was there. I was there.
Yeah.
We all kind of, created that whole hoax. And although I got to be honest with you, it was for about a minute I really believed it. And I started playing the album backwards. You know, they said, "Wait, or whatever it was." I can't even remember anymore. Play it backwards, and it'll give you the clues. And I was all up for that, so I was doing that on the air like a jerk.
Sold a lot of Beatles albums.
Yeah, it sure did, man. That was a crazy period.
Oh, really, seriously.
And so, how many years were you on ABX? Was that just a couple years?
5 years, about
five.
Let me think. About 5 years. I got there around 68, I think, and left at 72.
And then you went on to WBCN in Boston with Mark Perreno, where you were the Duke of Madness.
That's correct.
And I would be in Boston on business, and I would hear Mark Perreno on the radio as I was going into retail businesses, and I'd say, "Oh my God, I can't believe it! I found this guy." And then I found you, and you were legendary in Boston radio forever. That was great stuff.
Well, it was an interesting situation. I went to Boston actually to do my PhD work at Boston University. While I was in Detroit, I had GI Bill that I didn't want to lose. So I left ABX in 72 and went to Adrian, Michigan, and went to Siena Heights University down there. I got my bachelor's and then came back to Detroit at the University of Detroit before it was Detroit Mercy and got my master's degree. And while I was there, I was working at W4, you recall.
Oh, yeah.
Then Dixon and I ended up at CJOM.
Oh, right.
Doing weekends. I kept doing radio, but I was a student, and I finally got accepted into a PhD program at Boston University, and it turns out it's my hometown.
Yeah.
So that's why I ended up in Boston. I had a fire in my apartment that burned up all my. This was before computers, so all my PhD and thesis work was on yellow pads. Went up in smoke, and about that time, Parento left ABX and came into Boston to start a new station here in Boston, WCOZ. Looked me up, and it was wonderful. Timing was perfect. So I left my academic world and went back to radio and created the Duke of Madness character. That was at WCOZ. Then we both went over to WBCN, which was the ABX of the East Coast. And it was a wonderful, bizarre, freeform situation that we had at BCN. And Perreno was doing afternoons and I was doing overnights as the Duke of Madness.
Right.
And we had the best time. I tell you, it was great, great creative, once again, freeform radio at its finest.
Yeah, Perreno reigned there for a couple decades. Am I right?
Yeah.
And Jerry, I wish I could have gotten you on screen. We'll try to put up some video. You and I have spent some quality time together. You've come to all of our radio reunions. You've been to my home. I really, really appreciate you. You've been a gentleman, and you've had an illustrious career in becoming a professor. And I just appreciate you greatly, and I'm glad that you were able to make it on the show.
Can you keep Jerry on audio?
Yeah. So
keep him on. I want to ask you.
I'm so glad to hear Danny. Nice to hear from you, babe. Dennis, God damn you, man.
hey, Jerry got me a raise.
I really do love you. And just for the record, Dennis, before I left to come to Boston, I worked in Ann Arbor with John Sinclair, and Rudnick was on.
Yeah, Rudnick was on there for a while. He worked at CJOM too. He would play anything that had a curse word in it because he could get around the FCC. I remember hearing.
And Harvey, you're the best, man. Absolutely. And,
well, I did the all-night show. I was doing the all-night show. Following me on ABX, I did the all-night show for a year and a half, I think. That's when I learned all of the library And well, already I knew a lot of stuff, but a lot I didn't know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Well, Jerry
Goodwin came in following me. Goodwin had never done this.
Jerry is
1970 or 71.
Is a legend in Detroit and in Boston radio, and I hope that we can all gather again in person. You know, there are very few opportunities left for all of us. You know, we've lost some legends over the years. The last one was Robin Seymour. We had a big event just before he passed. Jerry was there, and it was a great event. 500 people came out to that party. That was spectacular.
Yeah, it was a good time for sure.
Yeah. All right. I want to thank all of you guys for joining me today on the Franklin Show. There are a lot of people out there that love and revere you and ABX. There's a website, there's a Facebook page devoted to ABX. This broadcast will appear there as well as many other places. And I think it's been a lot of fun, and I appreciate you guys sharing your memories. And it was a great time for all of us, man. It was great, creative radio. I won't say crazy, Harvey, because I know you didn't like that description.
Well, it wasn't only crazy. It wasn't only crazy. It was informative, educational, and it was fun for all of us. And I know there are a lot of people that are looking forward to seeing this particular edition of the Franklin Show. I've been promoting it for the past couple of weeks, and people couldn't wait. So thank you all for joining me today. It's great to see you all, and all the best. Thank
and
you, Michael.
Folks,
Danny.
We've got some clips of some classic stuff from Detroit Tube Works and a few other surprises coming up. So stay with us.
You're not going to get it all right. Just make sure you nail the big stuff.
Mama!
Like making sure your kids are in the right seat for their age and size. Get it right at nhtsa.gov/the right seat.
I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Look back into the legendary WABX 99.5 FM, the original freeform radio station, and it spawned a lot of creative energy and a TV series called Detroit Tube Works. It was very special getting together with some of those great, legendary, iconic disc jockeys from the late 1960s. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you again next week with another fabulous Franklin Show. Good night, everybody.